Hey guys, Kieran here. Today I wanted to talk about the new counterculture that's emerged in a society that isn't easily identifiable. I was listening to a podcast about it the other day and I thought it was quite interesting. I realized I'm part of it, but I wasn't even able to identify it before. So, what a counterculture is, like, say for example, the hippie movement in the 60s of like sex, drugs, rock and roll, and opposing the system type thing, being out of the system. That ended sort of in the 80s and 90s. Those same hippies, a lot of them sold out and got corporate jobs. One interesting thing, even like Bill and Hillary Clinton were actually hippies in the 60s, and then they became, president of the United States and secretary of state, and did some very unhippie things. So the new counterculture, what is it? Basically, the new counterculture are people who aren't extreme on either end of the spectrum, like left wing or right wing. They still take part in the system, almost 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They're identified as people who try not to rely completely on corporate America, so they don't have maybe a full-time corporate job, or maybe they work part-time, or they have a plan to get out quickly, and they have their own small business or bigger business. They probably grow a little bit of their own food, or want to grow their own food. They get into nature a lot. In terms of political views, they're not extreme on the left or the right. They sort of identify that, we're all one society. And, if, say, for example, in America, there's a huge divide right now between the left wing and the right wing. And, like, say, for example, if you support Trump and someone supports Hillary Clinton, these people almost consider themselves enemies and won't even talk to each other in a lot of cases. But this new counterculture knows that the world's bigger than that, and that it doesn't really matter, and they probably don't even vote. Because I'll just give an example of, like, this just from my perspective is, I read this article about the slave trade in America, especially in the South, where basically, like, before, when they would enslave black people in the South and work for free and stuff. And basically these slave traders would have these special people come into the slave farm and teach them how to divide their slaves among each other, to start fighting amongst each other, so they couldn't unite and overtake the slave owner to leave. They would do it through getting, they would take some of the strong men who would sort of be thinking and trying to oppose, and basically tie them up on a tree and whip them for like a day straight, so that these guys were encouraged not to think, and then the female slaves couldn't rely on these men because they would see them getting beat and knew that if they would hang out with them, there would be serious consequences. So then everyone would start to rely on the slave owners and oppose each other, so no one could come together to do what was best for them to probably free themselves so they wouldn't be slaves. And then, with this, I would say fake political controversy, where they're putting the left and the right against each other and dividing the country, where, for example, in America, there's it's something like, I think 3 million people or something are locked up in prison down there, which is insane if you think about it, and it's a for-profit system. So anyways, my point being with that is they're trying to divide people, so it's like people aren't like, hey, what's up with this for-profit prison system where they're locking up people for selling marijuana, which is a plant that you can grow. So that would be an example of why this new counterculture is sort of like 1 foot into the system and 1 foot out, because we realize that you can't necessarily try and fight the system by just completely opposing it, because the system, the way it's set up, has a lot of good benefits. I can talk through this phone and communicate with you. I'm going to go for a coffee right now for $2, and that coffee is going to come from Colombia, and for what it is, it's so cheap. And there's so many great benefits of this system. But then we also realize that there's a lot of faults, where, like, the false war on drugs, for example. We don't believe in, say, gun control, but we're cool with, say, gay marriage. So basically, this counterculture is just a group of open-minded people who don't take things too serious, who really value their independence and not completely relying on the system, but use it to their benefit. And we realize that, trying to divide it between an us versus them isn't going to work, because we're all one people, and we need to come together. So Maybe you're asking yourself, are you part of this counterculture? Another thing with this counterculture is we're all very educated, not necessarily traditionally educated. Maybe you have a degree or something, but more you read books, you listen to podcasts, and you're always seeking knowledge and thinking. So I invite you to take part in this new counterculture. There's no centralized system, so no one's in control, because once you have a centralized system, it can be brought down. But in terms of this counterculture, it's like I don't even know what the name for it would be. So there you go. Maybe this will get you thinking. Let me know what you think. Send me a message, and give me a like if you like this video. Okay, guys. See ya.